This is George Zacalius, and this is my final scene. Um, so I'll start by talking about the models. So I have a couple external models. I have the tree right there. I have the cottage, and I have a torch. I also have for my pre-made models, I included my sphere and my pyramid. Uh, Also, I have my plane, which is textured to be water, and I have my terrain model. Yeah. Um, Also, before I forget, I also have a skybox encapsulating the entire scene. Um, so yeah, those are the models I have included. For lights, I have uh, directional lights, both for my a directional light, both for my color light and my texture light. Um, so that's what you're seeing right here with the sphere and the torch. On the other side, I have a spotlight on my pyramid pointed at the torch. Um, Also, I forgot to mention I have a rotating spotlight, um, and I have one more spotlight pointing down on the cottage. So I have three spotlights implemented. Um, yeah. Oh, in regards to the cottage, it's a multi-mesh. I believe I have four textures assigned to it. Um, yeah. And also, as you can see, I have fog implemented. Because I scaled my sphere, my pyramid, and my tree, the fog map doesn't quite come out right with those objects. Um, so yeah, they're not affected by fog. However, the torch, the cottage, and the rest of the models in scene aren't scaled, so they properly compute the fog data. Um, so yeah. Uh, so now actually inside of DX app, I start by creating my shaders. I set my directional lights, both for my color light and my texture light. Um, I do some initial, I set some initial vectors and matrices, which will later be used for my lights, for positioning, and for direction. Um, and then I draw my lights, so, well, my three spotlights. So these are the three spotlights on my texture shader light. Um, and then these are the three spotlights on my color shader. And then after that, I actually create the graphics objects. So this is terrain. I create the terrain model. I create the actual graphics object and put in the model from the terrain. I get my texture, assign that, set my light parameters, um, set my world, and then pass that in. Essentially doing the same thing for all my other models. Um, for cabins, it's a multi-mesh. I have to create three additional textures for it. I then have to assign them by their indices. And yeah, and everything else is pretty much the same. Um, yeah. And then, so those are all my graphics objects, just creating them and giving them, setting their values. Uh, and then in draw scene, I start by drawing the texture objects. The only texture object is my skybox. I had to implement fog into texture, just plain texture. So instead of, well, I had to create a new C buffer for the for the fog data. However, I also need my eye position and my world inverse. So I just passed world inverse when I pass in my world, and I just added eye position to when I pass in fog data. Um, so yeah. Um, then after I render my skybox, I render my light color objects. My only light color objects is my sphere, which is on top of the torch. Right here, I'm resetting the my rotating spotlight. So inside my update, I'm changing lighthouse position according to time, so it gives the illusion of rotating, of the light rotating its direction. Um, and then after that, I switch to my light texture shader, where I draw the rest of my objects. Again, I have to reset. I have to pass in my new variables for my spotlight. All I'm really changing is my direction of the light. Um, yeah, which, as I mentioned, I'm setting in my update scene. Um, and then I'm just making sure I'm deleting all of my graphics objects, my textures, and my models when I close the X app. So yeah, that's the demo and DX app.